Hey, ambitious dentist, welcome to Start Your Dental Practice, the show for existing and aspiring dentists to take your dental practice to the highest possible level. I'm your host, Jonathan Van Horn, CPA and ABV, founder of dentistmetrics.com. In every episode, we aim to demystify the how to start a dental practice problem by bringing on world-class dentists, influencers, and consultants in the dental industry to pick their brain about how to get past the barriers involved from going from no practice to being a practice owner to owning your own successful dental practice. Hey everybody, today's show is with Jason Patrick Wood, the man, the myth, the legend, partner at the law firm of Wood and Delgado. So we're going to get more about his background in just a second. Now, this is a must listen for everybody out there. I'm really excited about it. If you've ever thought about, hey, there's a lot of legal things that happen in the dental industry, this is the podcast episode for you. So we're going to learn about today some of the aspects of what most dentists that get preyed upon in the dental industry, why they get taken advantage of. Jason and I really kind of riff on this for quite a bit. We're going to learn about how to make sure you're always getting the best deal possible, even with people you've done business with for years. We're going to learn about why running a dual brokerage practice while going with someone who's doing dual brokerage is typically not a good idea and sometimes can even be illegal. So it's also how we learn how to protect yourself and your partners and everything like that. We're going to learn about the right way to interview people that you're bringing into the business. We're going to learn about the critical way to think when you're acquiring a practice or even when doing a startup, as well as the pros and cons of both situations. You're going to learn about doing demographics reports, why females are highly targeted in the dental industry, and why this is critical to your livelihood. We're gonna learn about a lot of stuff today. Jason and I really go deep in talking about all the issues going on in the dental industry, not from just a legal perspective, but in my mind, just from a business industry perspective. I think you're going to get a lot of really good information out of today. So this is really a critical episode, and we're about to dive in. So before that, you're going to want to stick around to get a really great resource from Jason at the end of this episode. And you're also going to be able to get a free phone call with Jason as well. So very important. Be sure to listen all the way to the end of this interview to get access to that bonus. So now, on to my interview with Jason Patrick Wood. I'm really excited about this one. Hello, ambitious dentists. Today we have with us the infamous Jason Patrick Wood with Wood and Delgado out of California. They have multiple locations in California, but they serve dentists nationwide as a dental attorney firm. So, Jason, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So, Jason, if people are not familiar with you, with your great post on Dental Town that are some of my favorite posts, to be honest with you, because you really like to cut to the chase. You really like to just kind of call people out. There was on the movie Billy Madison at the end, there's this really famous part where he's in this contest of doing this trivia contest, and Billy, there's a big long answer at the end. And at the end, the man says something along the lines of, "You are awarded no points." Nowhere.
Yeah. And I have absolutely no idea what you're saying, and I think we are now more stupid than we were prior, or something like that. Yeah. I love that.
And may God have mercy on your soul, or something like that.
That part. Oh yes.
Every time I see one of your posts like that, I read it in that guy's voice, and I think of that every single time. So introduce yourself. Tell us how you got involved with the dental industry and what it is that you do.
I'm an attorney. Don't hold that against me, but I am an attorney. Our firm represents a little bit more than 4,800 dentists nationwide on business transactions. We don't do any litigation. We don't do any malpractice. We just do business transactions for dentists. And so we've got a very unique subset of knowledge that other attorneys don't have. And I mean, I don't know a lot of other aspects of law as well, because this is all we do. But the way that I got involved was actually my father was doing this a long time before I went to law school. I never dreamed I'd be doing this. Actually, I went to law school to go into politics. You know, I just never saw myself doing this. But when I got involved, I really enjoyed it. I liked helping people. I like making people's lives better. You know, so I like to think that, you know, I'm part attorney, part shrink, part marital counselor. It's been very rewarding for me as a result of that, because you get to see the changes that you have on your lives, rather than, you know, I don't know, being a divorce attorney, and then you just get to destroy people's lives. So it's been very rewarding. I love, you know, I love hearing back from clients, you know, hey, this is where I'm at. You know, this is, you know, you're my kids, all that stuff. I just love it. And I don't know why, but, you know, because of that, I just feel very committed to this industry. I'm very protective of this industry. And so, you know, I want people to make informed decisions. They might not always be the same decisions I would make, but if they're informed, they're going to make less mistakes. They're not going to be preyed upon by, and trust me, there are hundreds of people in this industry that will prey upon you. You know, I
was amazed whenever I entered the industry that it was so rampant and bad. I think that, you know, I may have talked about this on the podcast before, but I think it's because of the same reason that you and I are in the industry, is that there is a certain group of dentists that have so much intelligence, but they haven't had any type of, you know, traditional business training or business experience. And that fosters this, and typically they'll be able to make a pretty good amount of income. And so that fosters like all of these people coming in to prey upon on this industry. It's really disheartening and really ticks me off in a really disturbing manner. So,
right. Well, and then you get into all these, you know, personality tests, Myers-Briggs, and all these other things, and most dentists will fall into this one quadrant, and this one quadrant is, you know, very trusting, you know, relatively introverted. You know, there are certain aspects within that quadrant that can be preyed upon, and you know, it's the problem is that a lot of people, they don't like feeling that they don't know what they're talking about, and so either A, they don't ask questions, or B, even worse, they pretend like they know what they're talking about. And you know, it's a major issue in this industry, and people take advantage of it. So, you know, anyway, see, I'm already going down my tangent.
Well, let's keep going that way. So in your experience, is there a way to be able to you know, figure out who the shysters are?
Yeah, just listen to me. No,
that's the answer to everything now.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it really depends on what we're talking about. You know, I could say never listen to the equipment person, never listen to the supply person, but that's not always true, because there are, you know, yes, the supply and equipment people are going to try to sell you stuff and this and that, but and a lot of times stuff you don't need, but they can also help find candidates for jobs or possible buyers for a practice, or, you know, other aspects like that. So, you know, finding a supply person or an equipment person that is really has your best interest at heart and understands that it's about the long-term relationship, that's a little difficult to find, but you can find it still in this industry. But you really have to stay on top of things, because, you know, a year, 2 years, 3 years into the relationship, you're not going over things, because you're running into this well, he's been my supply person forever. She's been my equipment person forever. And you're not going back and doing what you used to do, and that is checking and making sure that you're still getting the best offers and best deals and things like that. So, just anybody who claims that they're a dual agent, dual brokers, I would say stay away from. Because in my opinion, it's an impossibility to serve two masters.
So explain a little bit farther for the layman what a dual broker is.
So a dual, I'll just say dual agent, because it doesn't necessarily need to be a broker, but a dual agent is someone who claims that they represent both the buyer and the seller, or both the owner and the associate. You can't represent both parties simply because as much as we don't like to talk about adversarial relationship, when it comes to certain points, you can't split the baby. There's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser. And so how do you, as an advisor, how do you properly deal with those issues so it doesn't harm one party? And so it's an impossibility. And that's why most of the time when you hear dual agent or dual brokerage or whatever, usually it's an illegal operation. And so there are definitely times when you can have a single person representing both sides. For instance, if there's a 50-50 partnership, that can be represented by a single individual. Where you've got an attorney representing the partnership, but not the individual doctors, you can do that. But if it was a 51-49, you couldn't do that. Or any other, designation where there's a majority minority. So, it's just oftentimes doctors do that primarily to save money. We only have to use one person. Well, yeah, I mean, if you go that route, you're going to save money on the front end, but you're going to be harmed overall. And so, I don't know. Typically, I don't know. Just be careful. Always have your guard up. I mean, even with Jonathan and myself, have your guard up, because I don't ever want to be. I love it when people question me, and I don't want to say challenge, but because then it helps to ascertain who really knows their stuff and who doesn't. I get a lot of people who try to parrot what we say and do. But they don't have the experience for it. Well, that's great, because you're going to be able to pick up about 80% of what I talk about, but that 20% that's so important, that we do hold back from presentations like this, that's really what separates the people that really know their stuff versus the pretenders. And so, I always say, no matter what you're doing in this industry, make sure you are interviewing whoever you're bringing into your camp. If it's your CPA, if it's your financial advisor, if it's your attorney, if it's your supply rep, your bank, whoever it is, you should be interviewing them just like you would a hygienist that you're trying to bring in, all these other aspects. So anyways.
Any red flags in that interview, or any questions that you know of that could lead to red flags? If you were a dentist interviewing a bank, what's a question you would ask?
Oh, a bank? Sure. Would be, do you offer conventional loans, or are all you going to offer me are SBA products? If all they have, and they may be a great local bank or something like that, but if all they have is SBA products, that's not the best vehicle for a doctor typically. I mean, unless you have bad credit or some other aspect. Because one, that there's variable rates with SBA, and then two, you've got a 3 to 4% fee associated with the SBA portion. And so they typically are not the best product unless sometimes you're dealing with real estate in connection with an acquisition or a startup. Then it may be your only avenue. And so, I want to know, how many dentists have you given loans to? Do you have something that will help me in terms of metrics, or where I should be in terms of overhead percentages and things like that, because a lot of the dental lenders do have those things. Do people use them? No, they don't use them as much as they should, but I want to know. And if there are some local banks out there that have a very good portfolio of dentist loans, but I want to know, are you a gatekeeper? Can you protect me from making a dumb decision? Or are you just in it to get the loan funded? And that's one of the reasons why I typically recommend dental lenders, is because I need another advocate. It can't just all be me when I'm representing a client. If the bank is looking at things, because they're going to look at things a little differently than I do, then, and the bank is saying, whoa, wait a second, we've got some declining or erratic revenue. We've got, these overhead percentages aren't making sense. They're showing 12%, staff wages. The dental lenders are going to know 12% is about half of where the vast majority of practices are. So that's going to shoot up a red flag for them. Or maybe there's lab that's only 1%. Again, boom, it's going to shoot up a red flag, because they understand this industry. A local bank that may have a great rate, may be able to beat some of these other dental lenders. They won't know those issues, and so they may be able to provide you a slightly better rate, but they're going to be giving you a loan when they shouldn't have been giving you a loan to begin with, and so therefore you struggle. Instead of being able to use your advisors, your bank, your CPA, whoever you bring in, and then being able to come in and say, well, wait a second, 12% staff, we should be at 22 to 25%. What's going on here? Oh, you had an office manager who was your wife and you weren't paying her. So we have to factor that in. And now all of a sudden, what looked like an okay deal is now a bad deal. So it's things like that, small little issues like that. I like to tell people, there are things in leases which it's literally, 8 point font where you can barely read, and it's in a single line in a 45-page document. And it says that basically when you go to sell your practice, I have the right to accept an assignment, deny an assignment, or terminate your lease. Well, if you miss that one line out of 1,000, then all of a sudden you go to sell your $1 million practice, and the landlord says, well, I'm just going to terminate your lease instead, unless you give me $100,000. And that happens. And so you just, there's small little issues like that have major repercussions. So
that's one of the things I think is really, really neat about the dental industry is the amount of things you just said were such a fine level of detail is understood about the dental industry now. So that literally, if someone out there feels any bit of insecurity and any type of questioning, they can find someone in the dental industry as long as they can make sure that they're the right person to be with.
Yep.
And that's not, for example, for CPA firms, like there may be attorneys out there that only represent CPA firms, maybe for like malpractice or something like that. But, for someone who can be able to watch someone's back like that,
right,
at the same time charging them, a competitive, a fee structure for what value they are bringing them, is a really interesting business to be in industry. That's kind of a side note, but so. Talking about the contracts and everything like that, let's start talking about, people that are out there that are on the fence, maybe thinking about starting a practice or buying a practice. What are your thoughts on those two options, starting a practice and buying a practice?
Well, I typically am biased towards acquiring practices. I'm not opposed to doing startups, but it's really, and you'll love this because you're a numbers guy, but it's really a time value of money issue. And so, when you're acquiring a practice, and I'm assuming you're acquiring a cash flowing business, But when you acquire a practice that is already providing profit and it's providing you compensation from day one, you're immediately hitting the ground running and you're making money. And so when you compare that to a startup is going to, it's going to take 4 to 6 months to do a build out if you're lucky. Some places it's 9 months, which is crazy. But you got 4 to 6 months of a build out. Then you have, hopefully, you've turned a profit in 12 months. But a lot of our clients, they're still not hitting a profitable note until about month 12 after they've started up. And so now all of a sudden you've got 18 months of not making money, actually being in the negative because you've already taken out the loan. And so you've got an 18-month gap, and trying to close that gap compared to where you already were as an acquisition, it's very hard to get to the level playing field. And so that's why I'm typically pro acquisitions. But that's not a hard and fast rule for me, but far too many people make mistakes on both avenues. And so for startups, they like, this is a great area I want to live in. And, so I want to do a startup. Well, did you do a demographic analysis? Okay. What did the demographic analysis show? Well, it showed about 1,000 to 1 for patients to doctor ratio. Well, that's not good enough. You're not going to do well in 1,000 to 1 ratio. And so too many people fall in love with an area. Oh, well, that's got a great nightlife, or it's a great suburb and they have great schools, and eventually I think I'm going to get married and have beautiful kids. Well, that's not the way we think. Unfortunately, we think emotionally when we can't think that way when it comes to businesses. So for startups, I want you to run a demographic analysis. I want you to have, in my opinion, I think it's 3,500 to 1. Okay, for patients to doctor or doctor to patient ratio. You can go to 3,000 to 1, but I would love a 3,500 to 1 ratio. Far too many people do startups without ever getting a demographic analysis. And so they go into areas that are already saturated, and then they wonder why they're struggling. And so that to me is a major issue. Another issue is people going into medical complex buildings when you're a GP. That is typically a negative. That's the 1970s and 1980s model. If you want to grow quickly, typically you're going to be looking at retail spaces with great visibility. You're going to pay more, but you're also going to potentially, if you've done all your other things right, get a lot more traction from patients and things like that. So now on acquisitions, where people make mistakes.
Real quick, let's talk. I want to talk about that. We'll touch on that, your thoughts on acquisition real quick and the mistakes that were made there. I wanted to add one point to the demographics analysis, and I'll take it a step further. I found that too many people They get the demographics analysis and then they don't verify anything. If there's a 3,000 to 1 ratio, have they actually looked at the people in those areas to make sure that makes sense? Because numbers on a piece of paper don't really mean anything when you're talking about starting a business that you're going to be running for probably the better part of the rest of your life. And the other thing that isn't included in those numbers is who are those competitors? Because if you go in and you go down to the 3,000 to 1 ratio, and then you're in let's say you went to a rural area, which is a popular thing. I had Dr. Ferran on. He said that's what he would do now. You go to an area that has 10,000 people in it, and there's say three dentists there. Right. If you go and look at that, have you gone and sat in the parking lot of those people's practices to see how busy they are? Do you know how many operatories they have? Do you have someone there that has 20 operatories and has 5 associates that just has a ton of patients? Because if that's the case, then your ratio is going to be better. You're dealing with someone that's a really good business person, or someone who may not be a great business person, but they at least understand how to get patients to come to them. And you're going to be going with, be sledding uphill if you try and do that with that demographic. So
absolutely. And whoever, and going and getting a demographic analysis with the right people is really important too. There are never trust a demographic report that you get from a real estate broker.
Yeah, that's real common. Oh yeah, no, my agent said that, this is a really good area. There's only, it's a really good ratio. Well, what is that ratio? It's like 3,000 to 1. Well, how many miles is that? Oh, that's a 85-mile radius or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So, no, I would say the people, the companies that my clients have had good luck with. Scott McDonald, which is drdemographics.com. He's done a great job for my clients. Real Score is kind of come on board, and they do a great job as well.
David James, he's a CPA.
CPA.
Yeah, he's a CPA. The guy who created that was a CPA, David James.
But there's other companies out there that are securing you a demographic, but it's not really for the demographic analysis. It's for marketing, it's for other aspects. And so you really need to know the strength of the demographic analysis that you're getting. And so, and you should be going over what Jonathan was talking about. You should be asking all those questions to your, I might get this wrong, your demographer. I think that's what they're called, but I'm not sure.
Nobody linguist in our audience, I don't think, so it's okay.
I'm sure I'll get angry emails.
It was supposed to be jargonist or something like that. I don't know. I deal with numbers.
But yeah, you definitely want to go over those questions with with the person you've hired, because that's where you're really going to flesh out information in a way that makes sense to you.
Sure. So, okay, let's jump over to acquisitions. What are mistakes you see a lot of people making acquisitions or attempting to make acquisitions do?
I think one of the things that people do wrong in acquisitions, the first thing is they are so fearful of going into more debt that they're looking for small practices. And that is definitely, again, in my opinion, pathway to financial ruin. If you're producing $600,000 as an associate, why would you be looking at a practice only producing $300,000? It makes no sense. Oh, well, I'm worried about going into more debt, and the purchase price was good, and I didn't want to take out a bigger loan. Okay, well, let's analyze that. So you got a $300,000 practice, assuming a 60% overhead, which is roughly plus or minus where a dental practice will be. All of a sudden, you're looking at 120 grand, and that's before taxes, before your loan payments. So then now all of a sudden, you've got loan payments, you've got taxes, you've got that wonderful thing that I know you love getting in the mail every month, your student loans. You've got all these other expenses. I don't think you're going to be able to make it on 120 a year, let alone the fact that you've now harmed yourself long term in terms of being able to maximize the efficiencies of your own skills. If you can produce $600,000 as a doctor, you should be looking at practices doing $700,000 or $800,000, because now all of a sudden we have a hygiene component that you get when you're an owner as opposed to being an associate. So, you take that $300,000 practice, and 25 to 30% of that is hygiene. So you only have $225,000 in doctor production. You're basically doing a third of what you can produce. Why would you ever buy a practice like that? Rather than, okay, let me find a practice that is producing a little bit more than I produce as an associate, that is referring out cases that I do, because that's just a huge moneymaker for you. I mean, it's a profit center. If you can do 100% of the procedures of the selling doctor, and then you're going to be adding, endo, simple oral surgery, maybe a perio program, some other aspects, all of a sudden your 700, 800,000 is now 900 to $1 million, just because of the things that you add to the practice. I mean, that's in my opinion, a no-brainer. Too many people don't think that way. And so that would be a major issue. Another issue is, do I do all the procedures the seller does? If you don't do all the procedures the seller does, let's say you only do 80%, you shouldn't be buying that practice, because that means you cannot replicate 20% of the revenues. That's an issue. So,
you're basically buying your purchase price is automatically discounted by 20%.
right.
You're still paying it, but you're discounted.
Exactly. And so, and too many people do that, where, oh man, but this is where my wife will move to. This is where my husband's job is at, and therefore I want this practice. It's close to my home. There's another issue. You shouldn't have bought a home before you buy a practice. But anyways, there's just these issues that people need to think about. Remember, we're not looking at these from emotional standpoints. We're looking at it from a long-term, 20 to 30 year perspective, so that we can eventually retire. And this is going to be whatever financial decision you make, this is going to be one of the most important decisions you make in your life. And it's going to really set you apart in terms of financial well-being. And by the way, guess what? With financial well-being typically comes better family, lifestyle, better, all of these other aspects. They kind of flow into each other in terms of, a positive life experience. If you have financial issues, guess what? You're probably going to have marital issues. I'm not saying, and please understand what I'm saying, I'm not saying that money buys happiness, but what I am saying is a lack of money typically
leads to problems.
Buys problems? I don't even know what the right term is, but
it might not buy happiness, but it sure makes you comfortable sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. So, these are issues that we have to think about. And if we make the wrong decision, it's really going to impact our lives. And so that's why I'm so passionate about this, is because this is a giant issue. And by the way, and this is where I'm going to get into trouble. If you are sitting in the audience right now going, I don't want to buy a practice, I don't want to do a startup, I'm totally fine with being an associate for my entire career, you're part of the problem. And you're part of the reason why this industry is at a crossroads. I will tell you right now that what you think that you are getting, job security, by working for somebody else, is a complete crock. It's a complete farce. The easiest way to financial freedom from those student loan debts that you're so worried about is the acquisition of a practice and owning your own business. And it's not very difficult to walk you through the numbers here, but most associate doctors in a corporate or whatever, they're going to make between $100,000 and $150,000. There's definitely some rock stars that'll make up to 200. But let's go crazy and say that you're going to make $200,000 as an associate every year. So first off, you're going to be an employee. And if you talk to Jonathan, he'll be able to explain to you the difference between being a business owner and an employee, and how much more you can stretch every single dollar being an owner as opposed to being an employee. That $200,000 as an owner goes a lot further than an employee. And that's one of the main reasons. And understand, remember, we're assuming 60% overhead. So what does that mean for us? That means that if you think that you can manage and own a practice that is generating $500,000, okay, that's not a huge, giant machine we're talking about. We're talking about $500,000 in yearly revenue. That's $40,000 a month, really $42,000 a month in overall collections in a practice. That means $30,000 a month in doctor production,
which is like $2,000 a day if you have a 16-day month or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to be a rock star to make $200,000 as an owner. You do need to be a rock star to make $200,000 as working for a corporate. And then when you analyze that 200,000, the owner makes a lot more money than the associate because of the tax benefits, the retirement plans, all these other aspects that you get as an owner as opposed to being an employee. Oh, and that's right, making 200,000 as an employee, Jonathan will tell you, you get taxed at a much higher rate than maybe you might be able to as an owner. So he can go into that more since this.
Yeah, absolutely. So you raise a lot of really good points, and speaking to the fears that people seem to have is that one, that it's too hard, they don't have the training. Well, number one, guys, we are in the day and age that there is probably a software program that does 90% of the administrative things that you need to do. Long gone are the times of having to actually keep a physical checkbook of every little thing that's going on, or some giant ledger pad that has 10 checks and balances within it. Technology is here, and it's making things easier from a business administration standpoint. I mean, Jason and I are talking through the magic of the internet, from halfway across the country that you're listening to, and probably a phone. I mean, technology has made this being a business owner easier now. People issues are always going to be a harder thing to deal with, but experience will typically lead you past that over time. And then, like we said,
I mean, you talk about people issues. Yeah, you're going to have to manage staff. Well, let me ask you this: how often do we hear horror stories just either a solo practice associate or in a corporate practice associate, and the office manager is telling them what to do, and the treatment coordinator is telling them what to do when they are against that type of treatment? When you're the owner, guess what? You call all the shots. But as an associate, you're going to be dealing with those staff issues regardless. The only difference is you have no power over those staff issues. So
absolutely. And I believe that the marketing is harder today than it was, say, 20 years ago, because there's more people doing it now. But I think that the running of the business is actually easier from a workload standpoint. So moving on that line of thought to that person sitting in the crowd, maybe let's move away from the person who thinks that they're going to be an associate. And just like you said, there's a million other things that happen to those associates. Is that if they're an associate of a GP that's not in a corporate spot, and they just like their cushy associate job, guess what? That practice owner will probably sell his practice at some point in his career. And if it's not to you, it's probably going to be to a corporate company. And don't think that just because you have this relationship with this owner that he's going to give you the best deal, or he's going to even give you the choice of the deal.
Right.
I have in the past, I've had a client that he was an associate, came in on the promise of an associateship. I have multiple ones that have came into as a promise of an associate to become an owner, and then that never panned out. When the time frame came, they discussed prior, the time came up, they're like, well, I'm not really ready to do that yet. So the person moved on to somewhere else. I've had people that just kicked the can down the road. When they caught up to the can, same thing happened. I'm not ready yet, kick it down until they leave. I've had people that got to the point where they were going to buy the practice. They were in negotiations. They had, we had submitted an offer that was accepted, and we were literally just working out financing. And it got really weird. We knew that they were delaying for some reason. We didn't know why. And come to find out, they sold the practice out from underneath us to a corporate practice. The owner, who had an associate who brought on 2, 3, 4 years ago to buy the practice, with the intention to buy a practice, came in, and they got to that point where they were negotiating. We negotiated the offer. We accepted the offer. Nothing had been signed yet for whatever reason. They accepted the money. We were trying to find, scrounge together all the money. We would send them a copy of one of the financing agreement that we got for them, a bunch of money, and they would come up with like these little nitpicky things they didn't agree with in the terms. And then, we'd be delayed. We wouldn't hear back from them for 2 weeks, even though we're emailing them every day. Right. And come to find out, a corporate company came in behind them and offered like twice as much money as the guy was trying to buy the practice for. And the seller dentist was like, it was just too much money. And, I've heard of other people that have had similar experiences to that. So there's, that associate was an associate of many associates. There was that were in there. And so all those other associates, guess what? Their heads are on the chopping block at that point, because it was a corporate company is going to come in and they're going to make changes. More than likely they're going to try and get that practice to match all their other ones, because that's what corporate dentistry does. Yeah. So
another thing they do is they do a great job of preying upon women. And
expand on that. Tell me about it. What are your thoughts on that?
We now have a majority of graduating doctors that are female, and they are told in dental school by people or by companies that will come in, typically because they've given the dental school tens of thousands of dollars, they basically say, how can you be a practice owner and a mother? How can you do this and do that? You won't be able to do it. Your practice will fail if you want to become a mother. I mean, it's some scary stuff that you hear out there, and the problem is that strikes a primeval tone with a lot of women, and it's a huge fear, and this fear that this is one of my big anger issues, is that the corporate chains know this. They know that female doctors are 1/2 as likely to ever acquire a practice than their male counterparts. And so knowing this, they will really focus on the female doctor, because they know that they can have them long term. And rather than females finding that way to financial freedom, they get ensnared by really what is golden handcuffs, and they're told, hey, you can't have both. And that's one of the big issues that I have is, out of almost any other industry, dentistry is one of the best industries for females to be business owners, to be mothers, to be rock stars, clinicians, all these other things.
Pillars of their community.
Yeah, but they're told that they can't have it all. And to me, that is just frustrating. And it's so important to this industry that females become practice owners, because again, they're the majority of the doctors that are graduating from classes now. And if they continue, and this is why I believe that females are going to determine where the future of this industry goes. It's not going to be, it's not going to be the baby boomers and when they retire and who they sell to. It's not going to be insurance reimbursement rate cuts, which is probably, issue number 2. It's going to be whether or not females as a group, not singular, as a group, get up to the same percentage that their male counterparts will in terms of ownership. Because, and it's the ADA came out with this, I think it was 2012, it could be 2013, and it was called, and I might butcher this, but Industry at a Crossroads or something like that. And you can go to ada.org and download it. And it shows you all these statistics, and it's really amazing. And I want to say it's 68% of male doctors will own or desire to own their own practice. Only 32% of females. And so if you think about that, if the majority of females are, if the majority of doctors that are graduating now are female, and 2/3 of them will never own their practice, who do you think is going to take over this industry?
Yeah,
there's still a need. There's still a need for dental practices, but what's going to end up happening is you're going to have exactly what happened with the medical profession, and you're going to have corporate chains that are already making up about 20% of the national practice ownership, you're going to have that ownership skyrocket. And what ends up happening is once corporate ownership gets past what's called critical mass, there's no turning back. And so what ends up happening is you'll have a suppression of values associated with dental practices, because there won't be this demand to acquire them because nobody's acquiring the practices. You'll then have the corporate structure, take control. Once that is taken control of, you'll then have a suppression of wages, because whenever a corporation takes over an industry, whether it's the hardware industry or the supermarkets or whatever Walmart's considered, you don't have an escalation of wages. You have a suppression. And so because there's this constant need, this parasite that is sucking at the profits of the dental practice. And the profits aren't going to go to the doctor. The profits are going to go to the shareholder. And so it's a giant issue. And for all those people who are out there with $200,000, $300,000 loans, this damn well better be an important issue for you. And you really need to wake up and understand that the next 10 years of this industry, if you're in the last 10 years or you're going to be graduating the next 10 years, we're at a pivotal point. And you really have to understand that not only will you be successful at being an owner, because the dentist default rate on practice ownership loans is less than 1%, which makes it the most bankable industry in the world to lend money to. Not only will you be successful being an owner, and I don't mean to make this greater than it seems, but literally your livelihood depends upon it because of what happens and what will happen. If you look at what doctors used to make, MDs, what they used to make, general practitioners, because remember, most GPs are basically general practitioners, general practitioner medical doctors. Mm-hmm. If you look at what they used to make compared to what they make now, they don't even make half of what they used to make. So, and I know that most of you aren't ever told this because
the dental schools have agreements on what education is given to them in dental school.
There you go. Oh, and probably your practice management professor. Never mind.
No, I've shared on the podcast before. I've had many conversations with people that contact me because of the podcast. I've had instructors talk to me about how they've given business lectures after hours on off-site campuses, and it's gotten back to the school and they've told them, hey, great, we appreciate you, talking about how much money you should be making as an associate after you get out of school. That was what the topic was. But they were pretty unceremoniously told, but don't ever do that again.
Yeah, and we can't. I can't tell you how hard it is for me to get in and speak to dental students. I mean, it's almost impossible. And we've told multiple dental schools, whenever you need us, we'll come speak. The only times that we can typically speak are lunch and learns, ASDA events, things like that where it's student sponsored. Very few professors will go out of their way to fight for their students and get non-biased, and remember, even I'm biased, but non-biased opinions of the business side of dentistry for their students. So it's sad. It's so sad. And I'll say it again. I'll say it to anyone who's listening. I'd be happy, podcast, Skype. Heck, I'll even drive to your school.
Mark it down. It's been better.
They need to know this. They need to know that their future is bright if they take control of it. Mm-hmm. So sorry. All right, I'm done.
No, I love it. So, like you said, the people out there just that point was very well illustrated. To put it into numbers terms, I approached a few schools, and I think the average amount it was for me to speak for 40 minutes, I had to pay somewhere in the realm of like $1,200 just to speak to a group of like 40 people.
Right.
It wasn't even guaranteed that those people would be there. So, average that out, that's 1,200 over, that's, I don't know, that's like $40 a minute or something like that. I mean, it's just a crazy amount of money to do that. So if you think about that, then other people have to be paying that when they come to speak to you. So that's a lot of revenue, right? For, how many 40-minute sessions are scheduled in a year? There can be quite a few. So that's revenue to the school. And, I don't want to harp on the schools because they are an institution where people become qualified to give the the help, the medical attention to the public that they deserve. But at the same time, they're a business in their own right, so they have all these motivating factors. Just kind of circle that back to the dual representation we talked about with brokers earlier in the conversation. It's impossible for them to be able to go down that path when there's money involved and not have that become a bias in the million little decisions they make every day. It may seem like a little decision to not have a topic about how much money an associate can really make in a dental practice, or how much money a practice owner could really make whenever they start their own practice, or the difference in the amount of income given to someone who owns their own practice versus an associate over the course of a 25-year period. Whenever you add in the compounding value of money and all those other things, all those items are things that seem maybe a little decision in the realm of the school's decisions of how many students do we have, what type of curriculum do we have, what type of et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But whenever money becomes involved, if it becomes a little decision, almost always they're going to fall on the little decision side that gets them a little bit of money.
Yep.
Because because they do it for a year, and then guess what? Next year, we have budgets we have to meet. We have we have a certain amount of revenue we have to meet. If we drop these off, then our spending that we spent last year for the money we received is not going to be up to par. So we're stuck in this vicious cycle at that point. So anyway, so let's talk real quick again. If you have any insight on this, I'd love to hear it. To the person in the crowd that they want to own a practice, but they're looking for the right practice. You talked about how you've got to find the right practice. And especially like here in Arkansas, it can be really difficult to find practices that are available that aren't those $300,000 to $400,000 practices. They're generating revenue in that realm. That it's always the guy that says, "Oh, it's a retiring dentist. He's been taking time off and he only works 3 days a week, and he does $400,000 a year." And I have to tell that person, well, that's not very much money for 3 days a week. But how if you were someone in the crowd that was wanting to buy a dental practice but couldn't find the right practice, how would you approach finding a dental practice? Do you have any advice on that?
Well, that's a great question. And I mean, keep in mind that I'm not saying don't buy the $300,000 practice. It's just you got to have a plan. You can't be. You got to be associating somewhere else. You got to be analyzing that $300,000 practice. And yes, if there's an $800,000 practice available, I would prefer you to take the $800,000. But we don't live in a perfect world, and so sometimes you have to be associating while you've purchased a smaller practice. But even then, I want you analyzing that small practice. You may find a variable gold mine because a doctor is 75. He's been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for these things to develop, and he's just a patch and wait doctor. There could be $1 million in revenue in that type of practice. So you really need to analyze every single practice you look at. You got to analyze. That's why when people say, "Oh, but you do this all the time," so this isn't that much work for you. No. I mean, because if I look at 5 different practices every day, there's going to be significant differences in each practice because we're dealing with personalities, we're dealing with different treatment philosophies, we're dealing with different patient bases, different local environments, all these aspects. And so you start getting into all these different issues, and therefore no two practices are alike. And so you don't necessarily need to find the right practice, because understand there's never the perfect practice. Where I see people running into is they get all excited about bells and whistles. Oh, it's got a CEREC machine. Oh, it's got ADEC chairs and this and that. Well, I don't care about that. What I care about is their cash flow. Are they doing a good job at managing their staff, managing the patients, managing their schedule, all these other aspects, so that when you get in there, you're hitting the ground running. So if the perfect practices aren't available, then yes, I would look at, how does this practice look for me? Not as if I'm the owner, but how does it look for me personally? Are there areas that I can expand upon? Are there things that just by me being who I am, I'm going to have a more profitable practice? Is there room for growth? Is there only 2 operatories? Is there 5 operatories? Is there real estate for sale? Because if all these other aspects are there, and the real estate is for sale too, that's a huge plus, because you're going to be on a different financial plateau by being able to own as opposed to renting. So all of these things, they come into play. That's why it cannot be an emotional decision. It has to be a rational decision. It has to be a financial decision. So, yeah, I would say that, definitely try to find the practices that meet your qualifications in terms of where you rank from an associate production standpoint. But if you can't find that because there's just not those practices around, then by all means, start looking lower, but keep that job that you've got until you grow the practice.
And how would you probably deal with more acquisitions than anyone I know, in dental practices, and you may do more than anyone in the country for all I know. How do people find those practices that they were trying to acquire? How do they find the opportunity?
So you can always go to brokers. You got to know which brokers are reputable and which ones are not. Good luck with that one. What I always say is there's pros and cons, but there's places like Dental Town where there's classified ads for sale by owners. There's your state dental society, your local dental society. This is where, remember I was talking about your supply reps and equipment reps? Those people can also tell you about off-market practices. But it really depends upon your area. If you're a seller in Arkansas, for instance, it's going to be much harder to sell your practice if you're trying to do it on your own, as opposed to listing with a broker. And so, but if you're in, say, Chicago or Minneapolis or New York City or San Francisco or San Diego, wherever, you're going to have such a high demand for your practices that you don't always need to go with a broker. So I would say, if you're a buyer looking at a for sale by owner, understand that there are some unique complications. Typically, for sale by owners have an unrealistic expectation of what the value of their practice is. They may not understand how to do the sale. So you may incur additional advisor fees as a result of that. Not a lot more, but there's going to be a lot more hand-holding. It's going to be a bumpier ride because there's more work that the buyer has to do. And don't get me wrong, there's going with brokered practices, as long as it's a reputable broker, is a great avenue for a buyer as well. You're going to have a practice that all the information is available, that it's reasonably priced for the area, that you're going to have procedure breakdowns, and you're going to have tax returns. You're going to have all these other aspects that make it very simple, easier to determine whether or not this is the right practice for you. So there's a lot less work involved from a not a due diligence standpoint, but from basically having to grab all the information from all these other aspects. So, I mean, so brokers, good reputable brokers, looking at their websites, please stay away from brokers that are ethically challenged. Just trust me on this. Dental Town, your state dental society, your local dental society, CPAs that are in the field, other advisors that are in the field, supply reps, equipment reps, all these people are great avenues. So
get out there and talk to people is what you're saying.
Yes. For all you introverts out there, yes, you have to talk to people.
That sounds so easy, and I bet you there's a couple people out there that have been thinking about all these things and trying to find a practice, and we just spoke to you to say you have our permission to go and talk to somebody about buying a practice.
Yeah.
Go to your study club, because the best practices I've found that I've had clients acquire was through some third connection. So like through if it's a private seller, they told somebody they're interested in selling, and they told their study group, and then they had like 5 people approach them.
Yep.
And the brokers, there's good and bads of everyone. I had one that just went through that was through a broker. The client found the practice for sale on a website. I believe it was actually Craigslist where she found the practice for sale, and she called the phone number on it, and the person answered the phone. They said, okay, I'll put you in touch. They gave the phone. They told the seller that this person's interested. The seller contacted the buyer. The buyer bought the practice, and the broker did nothing else other than that. That was the only thing that they did. And then I've also had ones that have been broken, that, the negotiations were broke down with the broker. I've had ones that were done as, the unrealistic seller, that happened. That was a really good story. The seller expected us to do every piece of paperwork, including the purchase agreement, and everything else. It was like he wanted us to do the purchase agreement, give it to him, and then he'd approve it. We were just like, if we do that, then you're really only telling us like one thing, that's price. There's so many other things we got to talk about here. Yep. That one broke down too. So, okay. Well, I really appreciate your time with us today, Jason. Is there anything, any other advice you have that you typically give to dentists looking into the dental practice ownership route that we haven't touched on today?
Well, one thing we didn't touch on was partnerships, and real quick, because I know we're out of time. You shouldn't be looking at going into a partnership or buying into a partnership unless certain metrics have been made. I mean, there's way too many people that come to me. We turn away about 8 out of every 10, maybe 9 out of every 10 partnerships that come to us. Hey, we want to do a partnership. Well, if you don't do a partnership correctly, there's an exponentially higher disillusion rate. And so we're very picky about partnerships. But I believe that partnerships that are done correctly, those are our most successful clients. And I'm not talking money. I'm talking about quality of life, how they feel about the profession, how they feel about their career, just everything. And yes, money too. But some quick metrics. One, if you're going to be buying into a practice where you're going to be one of 2 partners, I want there to be a minimum of about 1.5 million in revenue. The reason why I say that is because, again, talking GPs here, but specialists, they'll be actually higher or lower depending upon which specialty you're in. But it's applicable to all. But basically, 1.5 million, 25% of that is hygiene. So you're left with $1.2 million in doctor production. Divide that by 2, that's 600,000 per doctor. Divide that by 12, that's 50,000 a month. I mean, that's not that much per doctor. So when you really start getting involved and you go, okay, well, I'm going to buy into $1 million practice. Okay, let's do the numbers. 25% leaves us with 750,000 in doctor production. Divide that by 2, that's 375. Divide that by 12. Now you're at what, 31,000 a month per doctor? That's not enough to adequately support 2 doctors. So, I mean, I've had people come to me and say, hey, we want to do a partnership and this practice is doing 500. And my response is, well, do you like each other now? Because you won't in a few months. And so the number one reason why partnerships fail is money. The number 2 reason is divorce, followed very closely by no written contract disagreement. So you got to make sure that there's enough money in a partnership. Otherwise, it's amazing the amount of friction that happens when there's not enough money. You know, same thing in a marriage. You know, if you're going through financial troubles, it really places a burden on the marriage. And so, you know, the reciprocal is true for partnerships as well. So another thing is, I want to make sure there's 5 or 6 operatories minimum, because then you're tapping into more efficiencies that the partnership model can offer. If you only have 4 operatories, you both can't be working at the same time. And so it really cuts down the efficiencies. Unless you want that type of part-time partnership. And a lot of my female clients, actually my most successful clients, are female-female partnerships. They get it. They understand about shared sacrifice, shared reward. They are like the happiest people on every facet, you know, family life, career, money, you know, just everything, the way, you know, charity, all the things that they're able to do because they're in this partnership. You know, you want to make sure your patient treatment philosophy is, I mean, it doesn't have to mirror each other, but it has to be pretty close. You got to make sure that compensation structures make sense for both of you. You always want the partners to be on equal footing. That's something, you know, so whenever someone says, you know, I want there to be a 51-49 partnership, we're like, yeah, we're not the right firm for you. You always want to be on equal footing. And so that would be the thing that I would say take away is partnerships should be about shared sacrifice, shared reward, equal playing field for all. And the compensation structure needs to be written in a way that it incentivizes people to work. So, and that's pretty much it. So understand that partnerships are complicated. They're complicated and they need to be complicated. They can't be rushed through things. You've got to make sure that everything lines up prior to you entering into this agreement, because otherwise you could have your entire life ruined. Absolutely.
You know, to touch on that, as far as like the way the numbers go, another thing I find that most people don't think about is they'll look at the numbers, they'll look at the revenue, and then they won't look at how much the current doctor has. So let's assume that it's a 1 GP. Maybe they have an associate that the new person's coming in, they're going to partner with, or that associate's buying into the partnership. How much money is that associate making now? How much money is the current doctor making? You know, their wages plus whatever the cash flow is.
Right.
And if you can't, you know, split those up and make them equal, then, you know, just by logical math, then why do you think that all of a sudden by you being a partner, that's going to make things change? To the other situation where it's like $1 million practice, there's a GP there, he wants to bring on a partner, an old buddy or an old family friend that has came in, and all of a sudden he's going to be an associate and he's going to turn into a partner, you know, 3 years down the road. You know, what happens with the patients? You've got to have more people there to be able to do it. Like you touched on with the operatories, if you don't have enough operatories to fill that space, have more people come in, there may be no possible way with the way the systems are currently ran that can turn into a profitable partnership or a profitable enough partnership. You know, the patient aspect of that, the patient activity aspect of that is very important, because if you're in a shrinking practice, then it's just going to get worse over time. And right. Just by you going in there isn't going to magically make it any better. I mean, I've got some of the best clients in the world, and, you know, they're the nicest people, pillars of the community like we talked about before, but just because they go to a practice doesn't mean more patients are going to show up. It right. doesn't mean all of a sudden their marketing is going to get better. All it means is that there's going to be another person there doing dentistry. Yep. So if you look at a practice that you're thinking about buying into and it's got, you know, 10 new patients a month for the past 5 years, and it's just completely stagnant, there's not a lot that's going to change about that. So, well, great. Well, Jason, if there's anyone out there that's listening right now that you've struck a chord with that wants to contact you, what's a good way for them to be able to be put in contact with you?
They can call. Let's see. My office is 800-499-1474. You could also try me at my email. That's jason@dentalattorneys.com. You can also find me on Dental Town. Where else? That's enough. I was gonna say New Docs, but I'm not on there that much.
You're not all over Instagram and things like that, right?
I'm sure I have an account, but I
don't even know what Instagram is. My wife gets on to me all the time about it, and I'm a pretty tech savvy guy.
I just my Instagram account is really for personal, in the sense that I like to show off my body, a la Kim Kardashian. Yeah.
You're looking for the next reality show to come in.
Exactly. Yeah, I like to show off my muscles because they're big.
I just post pictures of me 15 years ago, and that's all. And I pretend, and I Photoshop my current face on there. It's a little more. Good. All right. Well, fantastic talk with you. Thank you so much for sharing the information you gave us today. I think it'll open up some people's eyes. Again, if you're out there, if you are thinking about becoming a practice owner, now's the time. Don't wait. Go ahead and do it. So once again, Jason Patrick Wood, thank you so much.
All right, Jonathan. Thank you.
A special thanks to Jason for sticking around longer and providing incredible insight to his life, himself, and his experiences as an attorney in the dental industry. Now, it's unfortunate, but everyone gets got at one time or another. And to be honest, guys, dentists are prone to be taken advantage of if you aren't looking for red flags or spotting the holes ahead of time. So in order to protect yourself, do yourself a favor. Jason has given us a buyer's checklist for acquiring a dental practice. So he's provided a free resource that is a checklist for buying a dental practice. This is very, very valuable. It's something that he gives out. He's allowing you guys to have it through the podcast. It's a great bonus, as well as if you sign up and get this bonus, you will also be able to have a free 15-minute phone consultation with Jason Patrick Wood, which is worth a whole lot of money. So he's being really, really generous with this time. You can tell the guy loves dentistry. He loves the industry. He's someone who respects the people involved, and he does not like some of the things that happen in the industry, just like myself. So I love the fact that he does that. I love the fact he has a real passion for this industry that I love. So guys, download this bonus, text the word practice to 33444. That is practice to 33444, or you can go to startyourdentalpractice.com/bonus if you're outside of the U.S. And you'll also get some updates from us over time about the new episodes that come out, and we'll be happy to see you the next time. Thanks, guys. So that's it for today's episode, but that doesn't mean that the learning and implementation have to stop there. I've created a free report called The 15 Numbers That Will Make or Break Your Dental Practice. This report has been downloaded over 1,000 times by dental professionals. So if you want your free copy of this report that's going to outline what the most important numbers are in any dental practice, and it also includes how to look at your numbers, how to set goals, has a whole slew of really important information that is the culmination of all of my experience as a dental CPA, then just go to startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. That is startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. And so that's it for today, Ambitious Dentist. Again, I'm Jonathan Van Horn, CPA and ABV. I'll see you next week with another world-class practice owner or consultant that will help you start your very own dental practice. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Start Your Dental Practice community. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor and go to startyourdentalpractice.com/iTunes to leave your honest feedback and review on iTunes. It's going to help me create a better experience, a better show, a better podcast for you, the ambitious dentist. Your feedback really does help, regardless if you like the show today or not. If you didn't like the show, let me know, because it's going to help me create a better show and podcast for you. Lastly, if you know of anybody that would benefit from today's episode and today's content, today's guest, please feel free to share with them on social media or through email.